Good morning, sociology. This week we go into marriage and families. However, before I get into this week's lecture, I do want to state a couple of things. So we are winding down the semester. We have about 2 more full weeks. So we have this week, next week, and then the following week, okay? So, and I think that the following week is just like a half of a week, and then we go into finals. So this week specifically, you have 2 quizzes. I will only, and I think I will only be putting up 1 more quiz next week. That's your 12, okay? There were more in between there. I titled them extra credit quizzes, but you would have had about 15, 16 quizzes. So make sure by the end of the semester, you need 8, okay? So the 2 quizzes that you have for this week, you have one on the chapter, specifically chapter 14, which goes over marriage and families. And then you have another one by Riedman on gay and lesbian families. That one, I will say, is dated. When I say dated, I mean that article is really old. So it's going to have a section talking about how Norway and Denmark are the only countries that allow gay marriage. We live in 2020. Of course, that's not true anymore. We live in Massachusetts. Gay marriage is allowed here, etc. So the article is dated, but it's still important for you guys to read to see how our definitions of what a family is and what it constitutes has changed, okay? And it's constantly changing how we define a family. Today, my family, if we're using a sociological definition, my family can consist of myself, my boyfriend, and a cat. I don't have to have a child if I'm using the sociological definition of a family, okay? I don't have to have a child to be in a family. Sound good? You don't have to live with your mom and your dad to live with people who you consider are your family, etc. But we'll go into more of that. So let me share my screen with you guys and we can begin. I hope this is recording. I don't even know if I set record. Okay. So I need to full screen this. Okay. Let's begin, okay? So we are moving on to chapter 14. So chapter 14, again, is on marriage and the family, okay? What constitutes a family nowadays? So before we get into our topic, what do you think a family is? How do you define a family? What does your family look like? Some of you might live with both your mom and your dad. Some of you might live with just one parent. Some of you might be fostered. Some of you might live with a same gender loving coupled parent. Some of you might consider your roommates to be your family. What constitutes a family nowadays in 2020? So think about that. Pause here and think about that. Okay. Marriage and family are key structures in most societies. Marriage and family in particular is a key structure in the United States. While the 2 institutions have historically been closely linked in US culture, their connection is becoming more and more complex. The relationship between marriage and family is an interlocking topic of study to sociologists, okay? So first, let's look at marriage. What is marriage? Different people define it in different ways. Not even sociologists are able to agree on a single meaning. For our purposes, though, our authors are going to define marriage as a legally recognized social contract between 2 people traditionally based on a sexual relationship and implying a permanence of union. Sociologists are interested in the relationship between the institution of marriage and the institution of family because historically, marriages are what create a family. And families are the most basic social unit upon which society is built. Both marriage and family create status roles that are sanctioned by society. So again, marriage is simply defined in terms of our textbook, is simply defined as a legally recognized social contract between two people, traditionally based on sexual relationship and implying a permanence of union. Okay? That's what a marriage is, a socially binding contract. Now, because this is sociology, again, this binding contract is just between two people. These two people do not necessarily have a gender identity. They don't have specific sexual orientation. So that means that this could be any kind of marriage between any kinds of people. Okay? So it could be between a man and a man, a woman and a woman, a man and a woman, someone trans and someone not trans, etc. Okay. The modern concept of family is far more encompassing than in past decades. What do you think constitutes a family? So I want you to pause here. How do you define a family? What does your family look like? Okay. What is a family? And of course, as a sociologist, we already know, you as sociologists in this class, right? For the hour and 15 minutes you spend in this class, you guys know that we have our own more broad, more inclusive definitions. Okay, so let's look at family. Sociologists define family more in terms of the manner in which members relate to one another on a strict configuration of status roles. In other words, family is defined as a socially recognized group, usually joined by blood, marriage, cohabitation, or adoption, that forms an emotional connection and serves as an economic unit of society. There are two types of families that we utilize in sociology and that you will come across, right? There are families of orientation. There are also families of procreation. Family of orientation refers to a family in which a person is born into. So your family, for those of you who have biological mums and dads and currently still live with them, you were born into families of orientation, right? You were born into that family, okay? A family of procreation describes one that is formed through marriage. So if I marry my partner, okay, we create a new family. So if you choose to marry, not even marry, because you don't have to have a family, okay, you don't have to, we'll get into how complex that can be, but we're going to stick with family of procreation. But if I and my partner marry, then we have now created a new family, a family of procreation. These distinctions have cultural significance related to issues of specific lineage. Let's talk about some challenges facing families today. People in the United States as a whole are somewhat divided when it comes to determining what does and what does not constitute a family. Okay, children specifically tend to be a key indicator in establishing family status. In the United States, many people continue, right, to believe that children are what makes a family complete. Okay, so you could be married but not have children, but many people in the United States still link children to making that family complete. Okay, the government, however, is not so flexible in its definition of family. The US Census Bureau defines a family as a group of two people or more, one of whom is the householder, related by birth, marriage, or adoption, and residing together. While this structured definition can be used as a means to consistently track family-related patterns over several years, it excludes individuals such as cohabitating unmarried heterosexual and homosexual couples. I prefer not to use the term homosexual. I'll just use gay and lesbian couples when I come across this, okay? Legality aside, sociologists would argue that the general concept of family is more diverse and less structured than in past years, okay? Alongside the debate surrounding what constitutes a family is the question of what people in the United States believe constitutes a marriage. Many religious and social conservatives believe that marriage can only exist between a man and a woman, citing religious scripture and the basics of human reproduction as support. Social liberals and progressives, on the other hand, believe that marriage can exist between two consenting adults, be they a man or a woman, or a woman and a woman, or a man and a man, and that it would be discriminatory to deny such a couple the civil, social, and economic benefits of marriage. Okay. So this is complex. I mean, if you're thinking about your families in 2020, just a slight side note here, but pertinent to what we're talking about. My parents cohabitated for a very, very long time before getting into the church and marrying. However, although they didn't have an official document that said that they were married, while they were cohabitating, again, it was a monogamous relationship. They were having children. They were married in their own eyes, but it wasn't seen as marriage to anyone else. Okay, so cohabitation is something that I grew up with. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not saying that at all. It's just we grow up in different families. We grow up with different definitions of what marriage is, etc. Okay. And again, although I'm a sociologist, again, I don't agree with some of the stuff that I'm taught, and it's okay, right? Because we have different definitions. Let's go over some of the marriage patterns. Single parenting and cohabitation, for those of you who don't know what cohabitation is, it's when a couple shares a residence but not marriage, the actual like social contract. Single parenting and cohabitation are becoming more acceptable in recent years. People may be less motivated also because of cohabitation and single parenting to get married. Some previous patterns of marriage are becoming outdated as new patterns emerge. For instance, cohabitation contributes to the phenomenon of people getting married for the first time at later age than was typical in early generations. Marriage will also continue to be delayed as more people place education and career ahead of settling down. I'm not going to tell you guys my age, but I am pretty old, okay? And I'm not trying to be ageist or anything like that, but being that I am a Black woman, specifically a Black woman from the islands, where my parents are from the islands. I'm from America, but so I'm referring to islands as a cultural trait. I'm not married. I don't have plans to be married anytime soon. And honestly, I will say it's because most of it is because of education and career. Okay. I went to school back to back, right? Graduated from high school, went to college, went to my grad program, got a job. I'm still fairly young, but Yeah, like I'm old. I might look young, but I'm old. And the older I get, the more, I don't want to just throw around this term, but it's the one that's coming to my head. The more liberal my ideas around family become, what marriage and marriage become. So I do have a partner, and we are monogamous. And honestly, like we've discussed this before, but if when things are right, we're probably going to move in with each other. Okay. And marriage is not seen as something that we need the state to recognize, but that we recognize, right? Like, obviously, monogamy is important to us, but it's like I'm with you, you with me, that's it, and we are going to raise this human being together, etc. It's yeah, the more liberal my views become. Okay. And again, I think it has to do with um, the emphasis that I've had on education and my career as a young person growing up. Okay. People in the United States typically equate marriage with monogamy when someone is married to only one person at a time. So that's monogamy. In a majority of cultures, about 78%, polygamy or being married to more than one person at a time is accepted, with most polygamous societies in Northern Africa and East Asia. Okay, so there are two variations that polygamy can take: polygyny and polyandry. Okay, polygyny refers to a man being married to more than one woman at a time, and then polyandry, it refers to a woman being married to more than one man at a time, which is far less common. We don't see that often. Okay, the reason for the overwhelming prevalence of polygamous societies are varied, but they often include issues of population growth, religious ideologies, and social statuses. So your book will mention, and I didn't mention it in this slide, but your book will mention the religious group of Mormons who sometimes practice polygamy. Okay. In the United States, polygamy is considered by most to be socially unacceptable and it's illegal. Okay. The act of entering into marriage while still married to another person is referred to as bigamy and is considered a felony in most states. Okay. Now, for some of you, it might come to mind, but I've seen this show, I've seen this show, I've seen this show. Again, some states, as we've seen, like punishments don't get given out fairly. We've seen that. We see it today when it comes to things such as race, gender, and class. The same can be said for bigamy. Okay, so yes, we might have very orthodox, not orthodox, I forget what the group is called, Mormons, but there's also another group. I'm drawing a blank. I'm drawing a blank. I'll get back to it. I'm drawing a blank. Okay. Joseph Smith. So this is a figure in your book. Joseph Smith Jr., the founder of Mormonism, is said to have practiced polygamy. Okay. So he had multiple wives. Residency and lines of descent. When considering one's lineage, most people in the United States look to both their father's and their mother's side. This pattern of tracing kinship is called bilateral descent. Note that kinship or one's traceable ancestry can be based on blood or marriage or adoption. Unilateral descent is the tracing of kinship through only one pattern, and it's only practiced in 40% of the world society with a high concentration in pastoral communities. Okay. Um, when I actually think of unilateral descent, I'm actually thinking of a religious group, but let me finish this. There are three types of unilateral descent: patrilineal, which follows the father's line only; matrilineal, which follows the mother's side only; and abilineal, which follows either the father or the mother's side, depending on the situation. Okay, it reminds me of Judaism, matrilineal, unilateral descent. Um, where if the saying was when I was growing up, if your mother is not a Jew, you're not a real Jew. Okay. So tracing the mother's side for kinship, for lineal, for descent. Okay. Stages of the family. So the family life cycle was used to explain the different processes that occur in families over time. So just like we were talking about socialization in children when we went through the socialization chapter, I believe it's chapter 5 or 6, that we discussed socialization, and how children, we continue to go through stages. Family go through stages, right? Sociologists view each stage as having its own structure with different challenges, achievements, and accomplishments that transition the family from one stage to the next. For example, the problems and challenges that a family experiences in stage 1, right? So this is when you first get married and you both are childless, right? With no children. Those challenges and those problems that you would face in change in stage 1 are going to be much different than those that you would face in stage 5, which is the teenage family years, right? So this is when you both now would have children, but they would be between the ages of 13 and 20. Okay. And even furthermore, if I add another stage onto this, stage 5, right? The teenage family and the problems that you face, the problems and challenges that you would face with a teenage family is going to be much more different than challenges that you would face, problems and challenges that you would face in stage 5, the empty nest family, right? Where now those teenagers that you once had in stage 5 are now grown adults and they've left home. Okay. More than 1/4 of US children live in single parent households. Pause here, think to yourselves, how many of you grew up in a single parent household? It's very, very common now. Just because you live in a single family, a single parent household, doesn't mean though that your parents aren't in relationships of cohabitation. Okay. But think, very common nowadays. Single parent households are on the rise. 10% of children live with their single mother, and 20% of children are living with their single father, who also live with the cohabitating partner of their parent. Step parents are an additional family element in two-parent homes. Among children living in two-parent households, 9% live with a biological or adoptive parent and a step parent. The family structure has been shown to vary with the age of the child specifically. Older children are less likely to live with two parents than an adolescent child. Older children who live with two parents are also more likely to live with step parents. Okay. In some family structures, a parent is not present at all. In 2010, 3 million children lived with a guardian who was neither their biological nor adoptive parent. Of these children, 54% of them lived with grandparents, 21% lived with other relatives, and 24% lived with non-relatives. The family structure is this type of family structure is referred to as an extended family. So an extended family is going to include people like aunts, uncles, cousins, etc. Foster parents account also for about a quarter of non-relatives. Okay. And then cohabitation, which some of us might be, I myself am familiar with. Living together before or in lieu of marriage is a growing option for many couples. Cohabitation is when people live together in a sexual relationship without being married. This surge in cohabitation is likely due to the decrease in social stigma pertaining to the practice. Cohabitating couples may choose to live together in an effort to spend more time together or to save money on living costs. Okay, all of which play into it. Again, go back to the beginning of the chapter, right? People also might be choosing these relationships, cohabitation relationships, because they're focusing on different aspects of their lives first: education, careers, etc. Okay, here's a figure from the chapter, and this is just a figure on marital statuses among young adults ages 25 to 34. As shown by this graph of marital status percentages amongst young adults, more young people are choosing to delay or even opt out of marriage. Being single is common today. And I can't tell you if it is by choice or not, okay? But it is common today, okay? So in the blue, you can pause here, but in the blue, these are people married, young adults between 25 and 34. And in the red, individuals who are never married between the ages of 25 and 34, okay? So more people, there are less married young adults the further along we go. I would love to see the 2020 data between 2010 and 2020, just to see if the trends continue, okay? More and more people in the United States are choosing lifestyles that don't include marriage. So singlehood, staying single, okay? Let me just move this over. Gay or straight, a new option for many people in the United States is simply to stay single. The decision to marry or not to marry can be based on a variety of factors, including religion and cultural expectations. Asian individuals, for example, are the most likely to marry, while African Americans are the least likely to marry. Additionally, individuals who place no value on religion are more likely to be unmarried than those who place a higher value on religion. For Black women, however, the importance of religion made no difference in marital status, meaning that for Black women, you could be religious and you could not be religious, but you are still less likely to be married. In general, being single is not a rejection of marriage. Rather, it is a lifestyle that does not necessarily include marriage. By age 40, according to census figures, 20% of women and 14% of men will have never married in the US. So this is US Census data, okay? Here is just a figure of the challenges families face in regards to divorce and remarriage, okay? So as we see, if we start from the bottom to the top, from 2000 to 2011, okay? We're just looking at the divorce rates. So it seems that divorce rates started divorce is an annulment, started slowing down And it's a slight slowdown, like slight. So it's pretty much like that until 2009. And then 2011, they started increasing again. Okay. And based on some of the statistics that we're hearing, based on some of the things that we are seeing in our neighborhoods, and again, I'm a sociologist, but we haven't gotten into domestic violence yet, but the amount of data that's coming in for domestic violence calls since 2020 began, and it spiked during the lockdowns. I wonder what divorce is going to look like after 2021. Okay. A study from Radford University indicated that bartenders are among the professions with the highest divorce rates. I can think of some correlations as to why. Other traditionally low-wage industries, such as restaurant service, custodial employment, and factory worker, are also associated with higher divorce rates. Think about these stats, because I would also say that they probably differ highly based on race, based on the makeup of the family or the marriage, etc. Lastly, talking about violence and abuse. Okay, violence and abuse are among the most disconcerting and the challenges that today's families face. Abuse can occur between spouses, between parents and the child, as well as between other family members. The frequency of violence among families is difficult to determine, because many cases of spousal abuse and child abuse oftentimes go unreported. In any case, studies have shown that abuse, reported or not, has a major impact on families and societies as a whole. For instance, 30% of women who are murdered are killed by their intimate partner. What does this statistic reveal about societal patterns and norms concerning intimate partner relationships and gender roles? Go back to our chapters on race, class, and gender. Okay. Again, women are still, regardless of race, are still expected to subscribe to gender roles, regardless of class, regardless of race, regardless of ability, regardless of sexual orientation, etc. Okay. Although they may have privileges above other types of women, above certain types of people who have different capabilities, oftentimes you don't have being male will trump being female. Okay. So think about this again. What does this statistic, right? Women are often murdered and killed by intimate partners, 30%. Okay, what does this statistic reveal about societal patterns and norms concerning intimate relationships and gender roles? Domestic violence is, trigger warning, guys. Domestic violence is a significant social problem in the United States. It is often characterized as violence between household or family members, specifically those spouses. To include unmarried, cohabitating, and same-sex couples, family sociologists have created the term intimate partner violence, IPV, okay? Intimate partner violence, so that now this term is more inclusive, okay? So it doesn't just include women who are violated by solely husbands, but you can be a same gender loving couple and your partner violates you, right? You could simply be cohabitating and your roommate violates you, IPV, okay? Women are the primary, though, keep in mind, women are the primary victims of IPV, intimate partner violence. IPV may include physical violence, such as punching, kicking, or other methods of inflicting physical pain, sexual violence, such as rape or other forceful sexual acts, threats and intimidation that imply either physical or sexual abuse, and emotional abuse, such as harming another's sense of self-worth through words or controlling another's behavior. Intimate partner violence starts off as emotional abuse and then oftentimes escalates to other forms or combinations of abuse. Okay. So one of the largest cases of our lifetime, I believe most of you guys still might have been in middle school or even elementary school, but the Casey Anthony trial, okay, in which Casey was ultimately acquitted of murder charges against her daughter, Kaylee. This created public outrage and brought to light the issues of child abuse and neglect across the United States. So lastly, going into child abuse, children are among the most helpless victims of abuse. Child abuse may come in several forms, the most common being neglect, followed by physical abuse, then sexual abuse, psychological mistreatment, and then medical neglect. Some children suffer from a combination of these various forms of abuse. The majority of perpetrators are oftentimes their parents, and 6.2% are other relatives. Infants, and when we say infants, we're talking about children less than 1 year old, were the most victimized population with an incident rate of 20.6 per 1,000 infants. This age group is particularly vulnerable to neglect because they are entirely dependent on their parents for their care. Some parents do not purposely, though, neglect their children. Factors such as cultural values, standard of care in the community, and poverty can oftentimes lead to hazardous levels of neglect. Okay. So that's it for this stop share. So that's it for marriage and families. I went through that really, really quick. And again, as usual, if you have any questions concerning the class, please email me and I'll do my best to get back to you within 24 hours. See you guys later. Have a good one.